Alright, welcome to part 2 of the 3x3 grid self-portrait. In this portion, what we're going to try to do is take our 3x3 grid from part 1, and we're going to create and save selections based on the face, background, and body. Now, once we create a single body selection in one of the grids, we'll be able to use it on the others. The same goes for the head and for the background. And the reason that we want these selections is so that we can selectively apply filters. Filters are a very powerful portion of Photoshop that will allow different appearances to your layers. But let's get started with the selection tools. To start off, we're going to use the rectangle marquee. That's the square selection tool. Well, I've actually gotten ahead of myself. To start off, I need to open the JPEG copy of my 3x3. So let's go to Open. I'm going to look on my desktop for my 3x3 JPEG. There it is, Hatchell 3x3 JPEG. The reason I'm starting here is because it's completely flat, rather than the Photoshop document which had all the separate layers. Now, what I want to do is I want to go in and use the rectangle marquee to create a selection around the center image. Okay, so I'm going to press the letter M to get the marquee, and I'm just clicking and dragging a box around the center image. Now, if I were to do a filter to this area, if I went filter, filter gallery, and let me zoom this out so you can see fit on screen. Oh, it's only showing what's in the selection. You can see it's going to filter the entire thing. And we don't want to do that permanently yet because we need to subdivide this selection into a face, a body, and a background. So how does that work? Well, the instructions will tell you, and I will demonstrate for you. If you press the letter Q or hit this little button down here, you'll go into what's called quick mask mode. Q takes you in and out of quick mask mode. And what happens is it will show you what's inside your selection clear, and anything outside your selection becomes tinted. So what I want to do is zoom in on this and hit B for my brush tool, and I want to paint in, whoops, I need to be at 100% opacity. I want to paint in the area over everything except for my body. So I'm even going to paint out my face here. So I'm painting over the background. Good. All right. So now when I press the letter Q, I can see my selection has updated. So now I have a selection that's just around the body. So I'm going to go to Select, ask it to save the selection, and I will name it Body. Now I'm going to press Select Deselect. The keyboard shortcut Control D is our friend. I'm going to press the letter M again, click and drag to make a selection box. And this time, before I go into quick mask mode, I'm going to try to use the magic wand and the Alt key to deselect the white background. That worked there. Does it work here? Pretty well. There's a little bits over there I got to fix, but that was able to isolate my head and my shoulders pretty well. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to press the letter Q, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to use my brush and make sure I've tinted red everything other than my face. I could have done that in the quick mask mode with the brush tool, but for me, I think it's just a little easier to set the table a little bit on those shapes first. So I'll do a little bit of that prep work there. Now when I press Q, I have a head selection, so I'll go to Select, Save Selection, and call it Head or Face or Head Face. Alright, so now what I want to do is select just the background. I'm going to use M for the rectangle marquee, click and drag a box around what I want to keep, and now I'm going to go to Select Load Selection, and I'm going to load in the body, but I'm going to subtract it from what I have. So that's giving me a selection around the background and the head, and if I ask it to select Load Selection again, and this time change it to Head Face and subtract, then it will get rid of everything. Now I can see there's a couple of little gaps here, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to press Q, and I'm going to press B for the brush, and I'm just going to make sure that I paint over both of those parts. Then when I press Q, I will have a background selection I can live with. It looks like I'm getting a little tiny sliver of white down here, so I'm going to hold Alt, and I will click and drag a box to get rid of that part. Okay. Now, if I press Q, you can see the clear part is the selection. I'm in quick mask mode, which is why everything else is tinted red. I'll press Q again, and I'm out of quick mask mode. I want to save this final selection, so I will save it as background. Oop, I misspelled it, but it still will work. Now, to filter the backgrounds, I need to do a couple of different things. I need to move my selection, but I can't do it with the move tool. If I use the move tool with the selection up, it cuts out that part of the photo. What I want to do is have my selection tool up, like the rectangle marquee. That allows me to move the selection from place to place. Even though it was made on the center image, I can move it from area to area. And if I were to click and lose it, I can always load these back in. I'll go to, let's go to head face, and we'll just load it in. Now I could move it onto one of the other heads, and let me try a filter. I'll go to filter, filter gallery, paint daubs. Let me play with my sliders a little bit. Dark rough, woof, light rough. Alright. Wide and blurry. Alright, so I'm going to remember that. I did paint daubs, artistic, and paint daubs. So I'll click OK. So now that area has been filtered. So I'm going to start to go to, I want to save this as a new file. So I'm going to go to Save As. I'm going to call it Hatchell Filtered 3x3. So now it's going to be a Photoshop document. I'm going to go through and filter all my faces differently. We'll do filter gallery. Instead of artistic, let's look at sketch. And we'll go halftone paper, high contrast dots, big dots, small dots. I don't know. So you guys are going to get a chance to experiment. They have different drop-down menus for each one. So this is going to be your chance to experiment and see what some of them do. So we'll go halftone paper. Cool. All right, now we'll go over to the next one. Maybe instead of going to filter gallery, I'll look at some of these others like blur or distort or pixelate. Maybe I'll ask it to be pointillized. You guys remember when we did the stippling project? This is kind of similar to the stippling. Okay, you can control the size of your dots. Now, these dots are colorful rather than black and white. All right. And so on and so forth. So I would go through and filter all the faces. Okay. Now let's talk about the other selections that we saved. If we load in the body or the background, you can use that and filter it and move elsewhere. Now I'll filter the background on this one. Go ahead and save our work in progress. Depending on your foreground and background colors, you'll get different effects. So I had black and white as my foreground and background for the halftone paper, and that made the dots black and the background white. Now if I change these colors, if I have red and kind of a pinkish magenta, and I do the background with a filtered gallery, anything under the sketch option, it draws on the foreground and background colors, generally speaking. So let's play with our options here. Light and dark balance, stroke length, horizontal. So that is the graphic pen, or I could do bas relief. Yeah, we'll go with bas relief. Okay. Now we'll use our rectangle marquee to move our selection over. Now let's try a different filter. We might do filter, distort. Let's try twirl and see what happens. It's pulling some of the pixels out of there. I'm going to go ahead and twirl it, minus 999%. And let's go over to this background. We'll try another filter. We'll do filter, render, ooh, flame tree. Some of these are new. What if we did crystallize? Crystallize, depending on the cell size, is trying to break down the image into kind of an abstraction. So I'll go with maybe 59. That'll work. Okay, now let's load in our body. Select load selection. Load the body. It's going to start off on the center because that's where we made it, but we can move it elsewhere to create our adjustments. Again, filter gallery. Let's look at distort glass. Okay, nice, smooth, but heavily distorted glass. All right. So I'm going to save my work in progress. We want to keep going until we basically applied a different filter from all of the filter choices, both in the filter gallery and all of these options. And we want to save this as both a Photoshop document and a JPEG. So your end resulting image will look like this. You'll have something different going on in the background, in the face, and in the body of each of the 9 images.